this session to get to know the Spanish market and the Canadian market. First of all, I want to thank the Embassy of Canada in Spain, Yves Beliveau, Laura Ballesteros and Karina Velázquez for organizing together with the Edtech cluster this session. I am Ana San Salvador, the cluster manager of Edtech cluster. And I'm gonna share the agenda of today afternoon. So first we're gonna talk about the Canadian market with the three speakers that are with us today, Bonnie McKee, Colleen Hannah, and Robert Martellacci. And afterwards, we're going to dedicate 30 minutes to talk about the Spanish market. I'm going to introduce the Edtech cluster and Isabel Calvo, as well as the speaker, and Majia Mirai. And then we're going to have 30 minutes for Q&A. Okay. So Yves Beliveau is going to introduce the Canadian speakers. So Yves, mic is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ana. Muchas gracias. Hi, everyone. As Ana introduced me, Yves Beliveau, I'm Trade Commissioner at the Embassy of Canada to Spain. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you for participating in this virtual information session, in which we'll be addressing information about the Spanish and the Canadian education technology sector. As part of my role at the Embassy here in Madrid, I'm responsible for the promotion of commercial links between Canada and Spain. And this is done by providing information to companies on both sides on opportunities that may exist for collaboration and exports, etc., but also making introductions between companies that could have an opportunity to do business together. And this event, to which both Canadian and Spanish edtech companies are participating, it's an opportunity. It is meant to provide you both with an overview of both countries' education market, as well as the edtech sector specifically. And I'm quite grateful to be working with Ana from the cluster for this session in a sector that's not only offers opportunities for business, but also is full of people like yourselves that are working every day to enrich the lives of students. And more importantly, I'd like to thank all the speakers that are here today. I'll start by introducing very briefly the three speakers from Canada, and then I'll pass it over to the first speaker. But we have people from Ontario and from British Columbia, so very far away from Spain, but all here together by the miracles of technology. For the first portion of the event, as Ana mentioned, is going to be from Canada. We have speakers from the Canadian Association of Public Schools, the Mission Public School District, so an actual school district from Canada that can talk about drilling down on what it is like at the very smallest level. And then we have industry sector guru. And we'll finish with the EdTech specific portion. But first, I'll pass the floor to Bonnie McKee, who is from the Canadian Association of Public School, who will go through the education landscape in Canada in general. So Bonnie, over to you.
Thanks so much, Yves. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Bonnie McKee. I'm the Executive Director of what we refer to as CAPSI, the Canadian Association of Public Schools International. This morning, I would like to acknowledge with respect and gratitude that I'm speaking to you from my office on the shared territory of the Coast Salish, Kwantlen, Stolo, and Métis Nations. I think first and foremost, it's important for me to clarify that in Canada, we don't have a national education system. There is no federal Department of Education. I do just have one brief slide that I'll share with you this morning here as I'm speaking. In each of our 10 provinces and 3 territories, they have distinct responsibility for the education within their jurisdiction. So how their education systems are organized, the delivery of curriculum, the assessment is really unique to the region. The curriculum, albeit somewhat similar, may be regionalized in terms of history, culture. We may also see some differences in languages, of course, Canada being a bilingual country. most of the education delivered in Canada is done so in French outside of Quebec. However, we certainly do have Francophone schools outside of Quebec, and we certainly do have Anglophone schools within Quebec, which is our French-speaking province. We do have what we call CMEC. This is the Council of Ministers of Education Canada, and this brings together ministers from all departments of education across all 10 provinces and 3 territories around some shared outcomes and some shared responsibilities. More recently, that's been around Indigenous education. It's been around global competencies. More recently, in response certainly to the pandemic, there was some response planning taking place at a higher level as well. But typically what you'll see on the slide here is that we have some slightly different structures in the education systems. We have a K through 12 basic education system in all provinces, with the exception of the province of Quebec, which is K through 11. We have a system whereby we start school in September, we finish our school year in June. It's a 10-month school year. Many schools, most schools, I would say, operating on what we call a semestered system. So this would be a 2-term system where students would take 4 or 5 courses from September till the end of January, and then another 4 or 5 courses from February till the end of June. However, we do have some schools that are on what we would refer to as a linear system, where students would take all 8 or 10 courses all year long from September until the end of June. That is more commonly seen in Quebec, but also in some schools throughout the other provinces as well. Of course, every rule has an exception, and you can see on this list here, on this slide here, that we are indicating that in the provinces of New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Saskatchewan, they have a structure whereby you would have elementary, middle, and secondary school education. However, we certainly do see some middle school offerings outside of those 3 provinces as well on a limited basis throughout some of our other provinces in Canada. There are approximately 5 million students enrolled from K to 12. So that would be from about 5 years old to 17 or 18 years old. Again, with the exception of Quebec, where education, the basic public education system goes only into grade 11. It may be worthy of note that 95% of Canadian families send their children to public schools in Canada. Of course, there are private and independent school options as well, which may be profit or for-profit or not-for-profit. Also, of course, somewhat entirely reflective of our distribution of population in Canada, you'll find that most of the students enrolled across the country, about 60% are enrolled through the provinces of Ontario and Quebec within Canada. I've spoken about our 2 official languages. You will also find many other language programs. You may find French immersion programs. We may find other types of programs such as Mandarin bilingual programs, Spanish bilingual programs in some of our member schools as well across the country. In addition, so there are some elementary education offering Aboriginal languages in some institutions that are governed by Indigenous school boards. And certainly within each province, of course, I should explain that we have what we call a school district or a school board or a school division structure. And this terminology varies depending on the province. So in the provinces of British Columbia, for example, we refer to school districts in the Prairie provinces, and Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, we tend to refer more to school divisions. In the province of Ontario, for example, and in Quebec, we refer more to school boards. But these are the regional, often larger than one city, sometimes encompassing multiple cities, or in a rural region, it could be a very large geography encompassing the publicly funded schools in a certain city or a certain region of the country. So in terms of funding of education, the provinces will allocate a specific dollar amount to each of these school divisions, school boards, school districts within their jurisdiction. And largely, of course, it's up to these school districts, school boards, school divisions to allocate funding accordingly, whether that be staffing or infrastructure technology that we're going to speak about this morning. And my colleague Colleen will explain a little bit more about what that looks like. But suffice it to say that we have a very decentralized system of education in Canada. Funding, of course, is also very decentralized in terms of that resource being allocated to school districts to do what they need to do depending on the specific needs of their region, of their school population. At this time, Eve, would you like to introduce Colleen, or would you like me to?
Sure.
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Colleen Hannah. She is the director of the International Student. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry about that. Sorry
No,
about that.
okay.
But I just wanted to thank you very much. That was, ladies and gentlemen, that was Bonnie Mirai, again from the Canadian Association of Public Schools International, and she was going to introduce our next speaker, and I'll let you do that, Bonnie. So thank you very much. You know her better. She lives in your neck of the woods, out in the British Columbia, beautiful British Columbia. So I'll let you make that introduction.
Sure, it's my pleasure. Colleen Hannah is the director of the International Student Program for the Mission School District, which is one of the members of our association. And she is also my neighbor, coincidentally. But Colleen, thank you for being here with us this morning to provide some more in-depth information about what that looks like at a school district level.
Then Bonnie, why halt Colleen Isquist, kin silch usiapach, kin tekethla miluch, Col Mission School District Kiko Kulut, o Skowlitz, Lacamo, Matsqui, Quantlin, Temechelhulauch, Kin Sukayam I Hastus. My name is Colleen Hannah. I just wanted to say good day. I identify myself as being Syilx, which is a First Nation in Canada. I'm from the Okanagan Territory, as well as European, which includes Spain and Portugal. And I also identify, my pronouns are she, her, and female, and that I'm on the traditional unceded ancestral territory of the Skowlitz, Lacamo, Matsqui, and Kwantlen First Nations. And I am a director in the international education. We don't have a word for that in my language, international education. So I just describe myself as being a district principal or a principal in charge of education. So I'm just going to share my screen with you, and I have a few slides. I think you can see it because I can't see the slides. So I'm assuming everyone can see my slides.
Yeah, we can.
Perfect, thank you. As Bonnie mentioned, that education in Canada is a provincially governed entity, sort of like our medical system as well. That's one of the things that is done at a provincial level. And then again, at the school board or school division level, particularly in all of our provinces, we have some jurisdiction where there's a level of governance, where there's elected boards and elected officials that actually govern our school boards and school divisions as well. So it's an extra layer of governance there. And in British Columbia, we have divided our school system up into K-9 education sort of curriculum. And then we have a 10, 11, and 12 graduation program. That is how we've sort of divided it up. And that's why you'll often see school boards and school divisions dividing up their schools in different ways. So whether it's an elementary, some of them include pre-K, or they call it junior kindergarten, quite low level. And I know for us in British Columbia, we're actually moving into the daycare preschool realm. I'm not sure we're putting everything, but that's where we're going, is we're trying to be more of a holistic system that goes beyond just the K-12 education, but more of a community hub where we're encompassing students and children and family outside of the traditional kindergarten to grade 12 sort of system. When it comes to technology, that's one of the things that is not necessarily provincially mandated. It is left up to school districts and school boards to decide how they want to move forward with their technology and how they're going to use technology. So it's left these are three big platforms, and I know that I was just on a provincial call yesterday for technology, and definitely Office 365 is used by 85% of the school districts as its only platform for school technology delivery. So whether it's use on the educational side or on the business side in the school districts, this is something that is a big part of technology. And knowing, as we've been bringing students into Canada throughout the pandemic, that Office 365 is something that's being used around the world. This is not something that's just North American based, but Office 365 is definitely something that's being used worldwide. Google Classroom and Google products. That is also being used by some, but there's issues with some of the Google products in other countries. So it's been really challenging, particularly for those of us in international education, because the platforms don't work in certain countries. And that's created some issues, particularly early on in the pandemic, where students had gone home and were able to continue their schooling via the technology landscape that we found ourselves in. However, that was a real challenge there. But it is still used by school districts and school boards across Canada, and it is something that students are familiar with. Similar cloud-based Office 365, but most of us all use Google as our search engine of choice. My Blueprint is sort of a career education product. It is Canadian, but I was just using it as an example of a portfolio or a platform of which teachers can use a portfolio. So we actually have Scholantis, which is something that was also Canadian created, that we have a portal, the students log in, and all their assignments according to their classes are all there. And then they can use the platforms of Zoom, Teams, everything Office 365 to be able to hand things in and sort of collaborate in that space. There are other types of portfolio systems that are being used throughout Canada as well in that sort of landscape that we find ourselves in. One of the things I did find is that because I was in technology before I moved into international education and just got us into the 21st century, I can't say what beyond the 21st century, we were quite far behind. And one of the challenges for school boards and school districts is we're not actually funded for technology. While it's part of our curriculum, it's not the only part of our curriculum. So that's been a real challenge, is the monetary part of our technology and funding our technology, and being able to decide on tools that are really cost effective. And I know that in British Columbia, we have a consortium that where we as school districts can sort of collaborate our buying power. So we have folks from the ministry level that negotiate contracts with people like IBM, with Dell, with obviously possibly Google and other platforms. My Blueprint, they sort of get a good deal and collaborate around the pricing so that it's easier for us small school districts, because I'm actually in a small school district, to negotiate, because sometimes I don't have the same buying power as other school districts. So if we as a province collectively do that, then it's easier for a smaller school district to be able to provide that technology to our students, our teachers, and our families, because that is where the challenges start coming in, is the equity of that. But COVID really changed our classrooms and our technology use. Our classrooms became digital for a while, and then we had sort of a coexisting classroom where some of our classes were still being held digitally, and then some were in person, but the digital tools were being used. But in the early stages of the pandemic, it literally was, technology was not an option. So luckily we had Office 365 in place for ourselves, and many other school districts across Canada, across the world as well, were using that because it was easy, it was in the cloud, and most of the education terms of Office 365 also provided families with 5 free licenses. So that was a nice thing to have, where you could put it on your iPad, you can put it on your phone. It didn't really matter what you were using for accessing that Office 365, and you could still log into your classroom. The downside of that was, students were often streaming their classroom on Teams on their phone while they're playing video games on their computers, because it was a bigger screen. So they prioritized their screens during that time. So that became one of those fun management things. But it also created opportunities for teachers and families and students to actually get that little extra push towards that technology use. Prior to that, prior to COVID, we had some teachers using technology. We were really trying to encourage teachers to use technology and make things easier, and for students to be able to access things from the classroom much easier when they left and they went home. However, with COVID, that became the way of doing it, but it also identified some of the divides. And some of the divides, as I mentioned earlier, were around just the money, having the dollars of in your household to have a device. If you're familiar with Canada at all, you know that when you look at our population and you look at where we all live with a very narrow band close to the United States border. So we're all living within, so many kilometers of the border. We live very south in Canada. And that is because we are very mountainous in many areas, particularly British Columbia. There are places where we have no cell service. I know that's hard to believe, but we have a lot of places in British Columbia and probably a lot of rural places throughout Canada that have very little or no cell service. They may rely on satellite to bring in any sort of Wi-Fi or internet technology or any of those types of services, which can be very costly to a community. And they're not always reliable. So you can imagine having been thrust into the pandemic, now relying on technology. Many of those communities didn't have the technology infrastructure to be able to wholly participate in the now online education environment that we found ourselves in. So I know one of the things in British Columbia that we did was that some of our big partners like TELUS and Bell and Rogers sort of stepped up and provided very cheap or very low cost or free in some cases Wi-Fi connections if they were available to families, and really tried connecting families as quickly as possible to that. We lent out technology and devices from school districts because children weren't coming into our schools. We were able to lend out technology, but then it ended when COVID sort of ended. We expected all of our devices back, and we kind of have gone back to normal, which has still left that inequity with some of our rural families and our families with just a lower socioeconomic background. It also provided challenges for our families who don't speak English. So any of our families where maybe the students speak English, but the parents don't, that was a real challenge moving to a technology platform where the parents weren't used to the technology, didn't know how to use the technology, and now they're supposed to be helping the children with their technology. So we did spend a lot of time assisting parents, a lot of times on the low technology of a telephone, walking them through the system and trying to get their children on so that the teachers could at least provide some sort of schooling that way. But in general, our technology has really moved forward in leaps and bounds throughout Canada due to COVID. And that has really pushed the classroom and education, not only the business side, because that side was already well on its way to using technology for many different things, but on the educational side. And we're noticing now that teachers are continuing to use those tools to enhance their classrooms rather than it be their only classroom. And I think over the next few years, it's just going to become normal practice. And we're all ready because our school district had a functional closure a week and a half ago. We just didn't have enough teachers to cover classrooms. And we switched just like that back to online learning for 2 or 3 days with all of our teachers being at home and all of our students being at home. So I think we're better prepared, and teachers as well as students are in a better place where they can use the technology for education and for learning. And it's no longer just a fun, it is always fun. I like technology, but it's not just seen as that fun class. Oh, good, we get to go to computers. There's actually digital academies, and there's robotics classes, and there's programming and all sorts of things that are being done at the high school, middle school level, where it's taking kids further and further into using technology at a much more creative use versus just I'm here using the platforms that are here. It goes into a much deeper dive into actual technology, possibly as a career for them. And again, it's just the cost of technology. As I said, that while it is provincially, education is provincially funded, our technology is not. It's not included in our funding formulas. I know in British Columbia for sure. And continuing to try to maintain and improve and stay up with all the technology can be very costly for school districts. And everyone's trying to find a way to make sure that we are continuing to move forward. And I think that's all I have around our technology, real sort of the nitty gritty from our classroom perspective. And just seeing that technology in classrooms has been a highlight for me. And I think for the students as well, they're happy to see like a hybrid now is being used, and the expectation that the tools haven't gone away, but definitely are used as an enhancement to the classroom.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Colleen. Again, that was Colleen Hannah from the Mission Public School District. Thank you for joining us today. And we will now move on to our last Canadian speaker, which is Robert Martellacci, who is CEO of Mindshare Learning and of C21. Robert, off to you. You're going to speak to us about the EdTech industry in Canada, as well as opportunities for business and collaboration between Canada and Spain.
Thank you so much, Yves, and wonderful synopsis there, Colleen, from an education perspective. I'm speaking with you from the Indigenous peoples first lived on these lands, and it's the lands of the Mississaugas that I reside on and work on a daily basis, so we pay respect to them. With that, Ola, I'm honored to give you a perspective on the state of EdTech in Canada and opportunities. Mindshare is Canada's leading EdTech strategy, news and events organization. We've been around over 20 years and immersed in K-12 and higher education, as well as pre-K. So we produce an EdTech strategy magazine weekly. We do research and we do events, and I'll share some of those with you. A quick overview of the EdTech sector in Canada and North America for that matter. It's never been a more exciting time to be in education, I like to say, especially given the pandemic, where we've seen over we went from some 40% of educators who use some form of tech-infused pedagogy to some 100%. So right now we're trying to avoid the great snapback where teachers might want to go back to their comfort level. Colleen alluded to some of the innovations that occurred during the pandemic. For the first time, we saw one-to-one computing. The Toronto School District shipped out 70,000 Chromebooks to homes across the Toronto area, and that was common across the country. We did a fundraising golf tournament because there were some 4,000 families who didn't have access to the internet. But there were great stories about corporates stepping up to support EdTechs and families with internet access and creating special pricing. You know, there is a real temptation to go try to do business with the biggest school district first, but the reality is some of the smaller centers across the country are more desirable, and you'll see that where they're more innovative. It's really about problem solving, and the necessity is the mother of invention. So, you know, that's my take on things, and diversity is our strength. We are one of the most diverse countries in the world. We have people from all over the world, and our education systems, you heard, is not a national department, and we pull each other along. And you'll see we just recently wrapped up a Schools of the Future challenge with the UN Sustainable Development Goals that really spurred innovation and sharing. The impetus was to share best practices and success stories. So in North America, it's a $9 billion business. In Canada, we're about 10% of the US market, just to be mindful of that. You heard about some of the stats around student enrollments being around 5 million, give or take, in some 15,000 schools. You know, there are some really hot spots in Canada around the EdTech ecosystem. You know, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver is also Calgary. And then you've got some spots in the US as well. The exponential growth of EdTech as an industry that's become organized. When I started in it, it wasn't called EdTech. Over time, it became known as EdTech. So that's how long I've been in the space. But there's over 4,000 EdTechs in North America. There's some 500 in Canada. And thanks to Yves Belvo, we are inspired to launch at one of our events in the US, the Can-Am EdTech Alliance event. We are launching the Canadian EdTech Alliance. So with that, sorry about that. So this was the event that we hosted. It was our 14th, to inspire teachers and students to share best practices and success stories. And it's about partnership. You know, the partners that we have. If you're coming into this market, you want to have a partnership with one of these companies. And that is really critical when you're coming into a new market. And we're happy to chat more about that. The top 10 trends that we see and we do annually. The OECD is a great resource of research, and I've been part of one of their research groups that met before the pandemic in BC. And, you know, AI, AR, VR, and adapting to the right tool at the right time, you know, to engage students and give teachers time back. I mean, it's really a problem-solving exercise. So great research that they provide. Global competencies to further future-proof students' skills. The skills agenda is really critical. And Yves alluded to my role with C21 Canada. I'm the co-founder and CEO. We were just in Winnipeg at a summit last week, meeting with leaders from across the country. Initially was inspired by the need to innovate as a country. And that was some 10 years ago. We're celebrating our 10th anniversary. And those global competencies that we talk about and giving kids agency are really a strong trend that we see. I've never been more optimistic about the future, given the passion that these kids have to want to make an impact. As an example, you know, the environment, there's all these EdTech startups and making an impact on education. In math, there's a number of startups that have emerged, and you're familiar with Paper Learning that won our startup challenge. They're offering tutoring through the school district to problem solve, to bring equity to all kids. And then Prodigy Math, 2 engineers from the University of Waterloo started you know, their company because they wanted to make an impact. So the notion of future-proofing learning is something that we embrace. So understanding what's next and how schools are adapting. We produced this document, which is available free at c21canada.org in collaboration with the school district CEOs and CIOs. And, you know, Andre Schleicher from the OECD had some kind words to share. And an example of a great concept is the pedagogical help desk that now we're seeing a lot more outsourcing. So if you can anticipate some of these challenges and really listening to the market and understanding what their needs are, there's some tremendous opportunities. You know, we're never going back to, you know, the 4 walls enclosed and disconnected. The future is open. The future is like we're in a work and learning space that we created in a shopping mall. So people are learning everywhere. We have work integrated learning students. We have co-op students. The more you connect with kids and give them agency and demonstrate to them that, you know, they matter and you are investing in them, the more of an impact you'll have. So with that, you know, my screen, I'm sorry, my images are blocked by our video. Just-in-time professional learning, I mentioned tutoring. There's huge funding for this, even in Canada. The ESSER's funding in the US, I'll reference US because really it's an imaginary border, if you will, in many respects, because the Edtechs in North America are doing business in the US, and sometimes it's a pathway to prove your and get respect, if you will. So oftentimes they get a start in Canada, and then they have a more of a holistic approach across Canada, US, and Mexico, and North America for that matter. But you know, professional learning has been a pain point because you're upskilling all these teachers who, you know, over 50% have never used tech-infused pedagogy. So there's opportunities if you're in that space. So I mentioned beyond the school walls and the emergence of work integrated learning and indigenizing education, which was what we explored when we were in Winnipeg recently around truth and reconciliation and paying respect to, you know, history and our elders. And so it's never been a more fascinating time to learn new history, the right history. Here's a really hot area for sure: safety and cybersecurity, digital equity, and access to stable bandwidth. You know, we just had the massacre that we saw yesterday, tragically, at a school in Texas. You know, there's been 30 mass shootings, and so dealing with safety, technology is a big part of that. In you know, systems that you put in place, and mechanisms, and as well as cybersecurity. And you know, kids need to understand. You need to, you know, from the skills agenda, they need to understand what's right, what's wrong. And you know, there's a lot of attacks. When you talk to the CIOs, they're constantly being attacked by outside forces. So if you're in that space, it's a very opportunistic time. And of course, stable bandwidth. You know, Elon Musk and Skylink is an option as well that has become very popular in some regions because of the remoteness. And you know, investment in Edtech in North America and beyond is exponential growth, because you know, a healthy community, town, city, country has a very solid education system, and we're blessed to have one of the top systems in the world. According to the OECD, we rank 4th and 5th in some areas. So it's a great time. We are entering, I gave an economic update recently at our workspace. We are entering a recession. Some people might say we're in it. So, you know, education tends to be recession proof. That's the good news. But you really need to be mindful of the value that you offer, and in so far as growth and expanding with private equity funding. The Sustainable Development Goals is something we embrace, and kids are embracing, because it's not about a job in the future. They want to make an impact. And we hear a lot about the environment. We hear a lot about, you know, there's 17 of these global Sustainable Development Goals, which is a great, you know, reality-based learning opportunity. So if you're aligning yourself with these goals, that trend works very well. It's very well received in Canada. At the end of the day, it's about evidence-based research and what's making an impact. Shockingly, this not-for-profit organization, the Edtech Evidence Exchange, the Edtech Genome Project, found that 85% of Edtech installs were unsuccessful. So, you know, that's the reality. You have to execute. You have to have a plan. You have to have support, and that's what we really embrace, and you know, supporting the Edtechs that we collaborate with. One of the projects we worked on proudly with the Canadian government and Yves' colleagues was with the Miami, Trade Commission in Miami, was an Edtech playbook in Florida. And we are hosting this event at the end of June in partnership with ISTE, which is the largest Edtech conference in North America, International Society for Technology and Education, which you are welcome to join us. and I'm sure we'll share some of that information where it's a networking event. These are some of our clients and partners that we work with. And so it took 20 years to be an overnight success in this regard. But we're passionate about making an impact and supporting companies that want to, help with awesome tools and enhance learning and give teachers back time. With that, thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'll pass the baton back to Yves. I hope I didn't go on too long.
No, that's fine, Robert. Thank you so much. And, it's pretty funny. Took you 20 something years to have an overnight success, but you're doing quite well in promoting it. And I'd like to thank Bonnie and Colleen again for really covering, I think, very well what's happening in Canada in terms of education, the system. And I think, that some of the Spaniards that have joined will have seen many parallels, but also very, very much differences between the two systems as well. And also, that was of course, from Bonnie's presentation and from Colleen, really having the perspective from a district. I think that's very useful for the Spanish when they're looking at maybe how to pursue opportunities in the Canadian market. So to the three of you, thank you so much. And I'll now pass it on to Anna, who from the Edtech cluster will be the first presenter from the Spanish side. Anna?
Yes, thank you, Yves. Thank you also the three speakers, Bonnie, Colleen, and Robert. Thank you for this overview of the Canadian educational landscape and EdTech market. And I'm gonna introduce very briefly the EdTech cluster, and because we are running out of time, and I'm gonna pass that to Anna and Majia, members of the cluster, they are gonna explain the Spanish market. Okay, so briefly an introduction to the EdTech cluster. EdTech cluster was born in 2013 and gathers the providers of the education technology institutions that collaborate together to support the growth of the EdTech market in Spain to promote an equitable, innovative, and advanced educational ecosystem. We integrate 65 companies working on the collaboration between the stakeholders of the educational ecosystem and establishing a joint framework that fosters business competitiveness at the service of educational innovation. We focus on the three main areas in the Spanish market. To link to the market, we organize sessions with the educational institutions to share challenges and bring trends and innovations from the EdTech sector. And also in the international level, we facilitate knowledge and access to new markets and internationalization processes and partnerships, like the session we are getting today. In the innovation focus, we collaborate. We do collaborative processes between partners, educational institutions, and public administration of the sector to identify challenges and ignite innovation processes. And we, of course, mainly get networking sessions between members to share and promote collaborations. Okay, we are about third part of the members are startups. About 15% are medium-sized companies, and about 40% are large companies. Okay, one of the main projects that we organize is the EdTech Congress Barcelona, which took place in April. It's a two-day conference and exhibition were addressed to headmasters of the Spanish educational institutions that we offer this space for learning, sharing experiences, debate, and get to know the EdTech trends and innovation. We get 15 sessions, 34 speakers, and 31 exhibitors, international speakers and national speakers. And in the cluster, we have, as I said, 65 companies in the technology, learning management systems, educational resources, research and consultancy, and some universities and school associations. Here you can get to know the companies that are nowadays in the cluster, in the technology section, learning management systems, research and consultancy, educational resources, which are growing a lot, and some universities and school associations. These are the representatives of the board members that we work together with. And as a team, we are 2 people, Eugenia, which is here today with us, and myself. So with no more delay, I will introduce Ana Calvo, who is the next speaker. Ana is the director of EMEA and LATAM in EDT Partners, and she has more than 20 years experience in the Edtech sector. And EDT Partners is a consultancy company that helps schools, universities, educational institutions, and governments to consolidate their international presence, accelerate digital transformation, and growth strategically in the new territories. So, Ana, the mic is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna, for your introduction, and good evening, some people from in this event, and good morning, and the rest of the people. So I would like to start to speak about who is EDT. No? I would like to put who is EDT. Later, we are going to speak about the data of the Spanish markets. Some consideration that I think that is important to bring to go to our market, about the relevant information that you need to land to our space, and things that I am probably ingredients that is important to go to the in terms of a strategy to go to the market. Who is EDT? No? Well, EDT Partner is a consulting firm focused 100% in education. We are a multidisciplinary team. Currently, we are more than 35 people working, plus 25 as a freelance. And our team is composed from different areas and companies, top leaders, not in the market, from the area of technology, curriculum, business developer, and from the different companies and firms of Apple, Blackbird, McGraw-Hill Education, Microsoft. So we work actively in K-12 and higher education. What is our focus? We help companies to accelerate the digital transformation, the growth, and expand or consolidate their international presence into other territories, sometimes connecting with the strategic partners, sometimes support plans for merge and acquisitions. Our portfolio of customers are multi-diverse. We have working with top leaders as a publisher space, as Santillana, Grupo SM, Planeta, McGraw-Hill, important tech companies, Amplify, Salesforce, or Amazon. Unicorns in the tech sector as Coursera of Age of Learning, and also important for us to work with NGOs as, for example, UNESCO. Last week we were in the World Conference as part of to create the white paper, final white paper for the UNESCO for the future of the higher education in the world, and Save the Children, Fundación Telefónica, and other players. We work very deeply with startups around the world, because we know this is startups bring the innovation to the sector. So we love to work with them. I would like to have a small ingredients about these points, because we are present in 12 countries. But for my perspective, it's not relevant to stay in a lot of countries. For us, it's important to have this overview 360 about what's happening in terms of trends in APAC, what's happening in terms of technology in America or in EMEA. So the idea is to bring all the insight that we can find from the sector that is important for us. Obviously, we have a very important partnerships around the world with Virtual Educa, Education World Forum, African Brains, and other players around the world. What is important in EDT Partners? Probably our methodology. I was working a long time in Santillana Education as a manager, director of digital product, and I received a lot of type of probably reports from the big firms and consultants, and it was great, the information that we find. But when we start to work to execute this type of projects, we find a lot of problems to go in the way that is defined, and especially because this type of consulting is not probably is not don't know very well the education, and at the same time because when we find these problems, we have to solve for ourselves. And this is a big gap for the companies when you give all these reports. So our perspective is that to use the methodology that is not only to define the strategy to go to the market, the idea is to go with you to the market, because if you find problems, we can help you to resolve it. So this is what we have done in Edtech. What about the market data in Spain? Obviously, I don't want to focus this information in the data that you can find in the Ministry of Education in English without any problem. I want to focus only on the things that probably you have to bring in terms to have clear. Obviously, we have around in the education is compulsory from 6 to 16. We are around 8.2 million of students, 1.5 in early education. In primary school, that is from 6 to 12 is 2.7. In compulsory secondary is around 2 million of students, and baccalaureate and vocational training is less than 2 million of students. But the most relevant of this information probably is how it's divided, because we have more than 28,000 schools in all Spain, and we have three different types of schools. Public schools, that is around 7%, private schools, that is around 7%, and what we call colegios concertados, that is a semi-private school. That's what it means. This is a private school, but the government pay per each student to go. But the final decision about what's happening internally is from the school, not from the government. That is something very important, or the Consejería de Educación, that we see what is Consejería de Educación. So if I have to go to the market, if you have a project focusing cultural and you have to go to the market, probably I start to work with this 33% of the schools, not the rest, because you need more time and probably you need special information about the tenders, and it's probably longer to go to this market. Obviously, our country is divided in 17 regions, and every region has different ways to go, because it's like a Ministry of Education. We have the Ministry of Education, but each Consejería de Educación is like in a small Ministry of Education, because they have all the competence to define some specific ways to go to the each region. So sometimes it's very difficult. So in terms of schools, even we can find a lot of different regions that have a lot of public school or private schools, or colegios concertados, that is semi-private schools. You have to know that our market probably is a very good market to go in terms to go to in a digital space. 97% of schools have connectivity in the classroom. 60% of the classroom probably have device installed. Some probably mobile phones is start to use in the because depending on the regions, we have regions that is forbidden to use the mobile, and some of the regions you can use the mobile as part of your learning process. So you have to explore which is regions you can use or not. We have probably more than 60% of the schools and institutions have all the service in the cloud service, that I think is important for some projects. If we focus in the higher education, if we have a project that is focused in higher education, you have to know that we have 1.6 million of students around, but it's only in the grades. If we have a lot of business school, we have a lot of type of project that probably is around more than 500,000 students working on it, especially because even you know, the long life learning is now something that we have to do every day, and we have a lot of students working in these areas. But what you have to know from this, or you should know for our market, is how is growing this type of institutions. I think that one of the institutions that is growing very good in our market is the vocational training, and probably for the next years is going to grow very quick, especially because it's the same in the private or in the public schools. I think that is one of the sectors that is growing for the because we have some students that instead to go to the university, they decide to go to the vocational training. That is not something that passed during the last years. Now the vocational training is changing very quick. It's a big transformation in our country, and even from the government, they probably have had put a lot of money, injected with a lot of funds to this type of projects focused in vocational training. About what is the region that probably we have to focus our efforts in if we have a project focusing higher education, I recommend it to go to the most important areas that you can find universities. For example, is Madrid, Catalonia, Andalucía, Castilla y León, and Comunitat de Valenciana. Probably we have to ask, are we in the right time to go to Spain? This is the most relevant or important question that you have to do. No, I think that we are in a promised future. Why? Obviously, the pandemic time, we know that it's changing a lot in a lot of ways in education, but especially in our country, we have a big change in terms of spending that has been significantly increased, especially in the digital space. And we can see in the second graph that we have the 12% in a short time, 5 years. I think that is a high increase. At the same time, we say that when we start to work with in our market, we need to know where is the money, and we have to follow this money. And in this particular point, you have to know that we are part of the European Union funds, European unions, and they have special funds that the name is Next Generation, and we have received the government has received a lot of money from these funds. So probably for the next, we have around 244 millions of euros focused for training for the teachers and to give the possibility to the institutions to improve all the digital competence that they need. But at the same time, in total, we are going to receive more than 1 billion of euros to digitize or to transform all the institutions. So I suggest, and I think that we are in a very good moment to go to our market, because probably we are going to have a lot of companies and we are going to have a lot of institutions with enough funds to go quick to these transformations. Obviously, I think that in terms of to go to the public institutions, I think that we have to have a big effort, because we have they have defined special policies in terms to promote all this transformation. But as I shared from the beginning, you need a special help to go to the tenders and to go to define very good and to connect with this type of consejerias to go on it. Considerations that I think that is important to know. Well, the first one the first thing that you need to go to our market is please bring with a positive experience from Canada. I think that we can replicate here, but we need to have this message, this value message, very ready to go. Obviously, we have to provide some specific. We need to explore the market fit of our market, but at the same time we have to identify probably the institution that I have to willing with it. No, it's very difficult to know which is the institution we can cross the information if we don't have a special product in front of us. No, the second things that is important is to discover the pains and gains. That is probably the most relevant things that we have to define to know and to define which is the niche of business that we can focus our efforts. No, obviously we need elements for the communication in the Spanish-speaking world, not only for Spain, because when you start to work on this area, you have to know that Spain is a very good key to open the Latin space and to open the market in Latin space, because most of the companies that we have here, probably the most relevant institutions, have a big impact in Latin space, because the Spanish-speaking world is very close. So it's very interesting to know which is the type of element you need to go, not only for Spain, even to the Latin space. And obviously, to create the pilot is very interesting, because it's very easy to scale your project when you have a pilot to go. Which is the most relevant framework that you are going to find? Obviously, if you have a project focused in hybrid learning, adaptive learning, well-being assessment, augmented reality or virtual reality, teacher training is a very good moment. I recommend it to use some specific channels to amplify your project. Is the case, for example, in this particular point, the cluster. I think that is a very good point to amplify your project. And even we have a different accelerators or incubators that we have, Amazon Web Service Edtech, Edtech Havoc, SecLab. We have different projects. No? Obviously, you have to know that we have a very good relation with the institutions focused in developed content. For example, the publishers with Sanoma, SM Group, Vives Vives, Anaya, Edelvives, Bruno, and all of these companies have a big impact in Latin space. Well, in this particular case, Santillana now belongs to Sanoma, that is a Finland company. And the last one is to go to special events that probably help you to amplify your project. In the case in Spain, probably the most relevant project is Mobile World Congress, Semana de la Educación, Sport Learning, International Conference on Modern Research, Edtech, the project that Anna shared with you, Edtech Cluster, UNESCO World Higher Education Conference that it was this year. This is what's happened in the last week. And a lot of type of event that can be very interesting to cross or to visit if you want to come to our market. What of the type of information you need that you have to be very clear to start to work in our market? Obviously, this is a type of items that everybody have to know. But I want to clarify special points. The first one, the pricing. This is not the same to go to the Canada, that for me is a tier 1, that you come to Spain, that is a tier 2 probably. So please pay attention with the policy of pricing that you have. The second one probably is the language. We have here 5 languages, it's not the Spanish. When you start to work in education in Spain, you have to be careful because we have Catalan, Basco, Gallego, Valenciano, and Balear. So it's a very difficult sometimes to focus only in one space. So this is 2 points that you have to be very clear. And always the last one is the legitimize. The idea that you can bring some experience that can be very positive to go to our market. In terms of to bring some ingredients to create your strategy, I would like to define 3 areas that you have to work. The first one, if you want to go to grow formally, obviously you have to focus in the product. It is the same for me to focus in the B2B, B2C, B2G, B2B2C, the different business model. But obviously, it's very important to know that you have to probably laser and focus in the private sector. You have to build always a success case at the percentage that you think that is right to go, but please make suggestions to refine your value proposition. I like to focus in the value proposition, not in the product, and I think this works very well. And probably the most difficult in our market sometimes is to define our ideal customer. No, what is your ideal customer? Educational institution, educational publisher, telcos? I don't know. This is something that you have to discover. The second percentage that you have to define is what type of percentage of my strategy I am going to use to go to create it to grow in organic way, you know? Because I think that we can grow with channel partners, with aggregators, with partnerships, and this is something very important to know what the percentage of my efforts I am going to dedicate to create these relationships. Is a technology integrators, large area education institution. This is something that you have to define very well to requires a lot of efforts, because sometimes you need a special and requires pricing strategies that sometimes is very difficult to define. And the last one, especially when your project is focusing B2C, probably you need a special brand awareness. So the idea is that your project is completely new in our market. Probably you need to have to create the community. You have to share value from your project, and you have to define a strategy to go to our market in terms of different way. No, you can create it podcast, you can create it, you can share information in the social media channel, you can create a brand video in Spanish to share. So you need to take care what kind of percentage of your strategy you are going to dedicate to this brand awareness. And thank you so much. This is all for my side, and I think that I am on time now.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much for this deeply overview of the
very quick.
Yeah, I think
short time, a lot of
have
information.
to go through your presentation again in a slowly way. Okay, thank you very much. And the last speaker I want to introduce is also one of our members in the cluster, is Majia Mirai. He's the founder of I Like Education, a consultancy company in the EdTech market, and a startup EdTech advisor as well. He's been for more than 20 years in the EdTech sector, and previous in the university sector, and also in publishing companies. So Majia is gonna explain us a bit of the processes to supply EdTech to schools in Spain. Thank you very much, Majia. Sorry, Majia, are you with the mic open?
Oh, excuse me. Okay. Thank you very much, Anna. And I present a little explanation of opening the Spanish market in EdTech. I think it's a presentation very applied, and you can see here clear examples, real examples of people who are opening this difficult but interesting market. Yeah, at the beginning, a little market snapshot. We have some bad news and some good news. In one hand, we have one bad news. The EdTech in the K-12 schools is not very extensive. People are interested on it, but people decide in very important schools like Jesuitas or like La Salle, centered in change the pedagogical model, but they decide not apply important challenges in the pedagogical change. But this is bad news who we are now changing. In the other hand, the innovation projects.
Majia, just a sec. You are not sharing the presentation. Do you want to share the presentation?
You don't say the presentation, excuse me.
I think you shared at the beginning, but you stopped sharing. Just
okay. Excuse me. Here.
Do you want me to share? I have your presentation.
Yes.
Okay.
No. Okay. I think now.
Oh yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Excellent. Thanks.
The second bad news is the innovation projects and the projects of the government are focused on the devices. Many money from the government appears in the European projects, but this money goes to blackboards, goes to devices, goes to laptops, and only a little part of these European projects going to EdTech software, going to change the methodologies, but it's beginning. In the other hand, we know the Spanish market is a very good door to going to LATAM, and LATAM is a big market, and many companies in Spain are opening business in LATAM at the same time who are opening the business in Spain. And last month we have a very successful congress organized by Edtech Cluster, and I think is an important notice for the market. Now I'm talking about 5 ways, 5 methods to open the market. The method 1 is the home or domestic method. It's going to directly to the parents and to the children. For this method, you need to use digital marketing. Especially you need to use digital marketing on Instagram, on YouTube, on Google, and you need a very engagement product. If you have a product who engage the children, especially who inform the parents, but the most important to use this way is engage the children. If you have a product who engage the children, you can go to this way, like 2 companies in Spain. In Spain, I think use this way better is Smartick or Lingo Kids, and I think is a very good way in Spain, and these companies open the market in this way. The second one is access to the teachers. To access to the teachers, you need a product who are organized in a freemium strategy. You need a free space in your product and a premium space. To use this way, you need to set a low price, because teachers at the beginning decide use the product without important decision, to solving some problem, to saving time. And we have 2 examples who are open the market in this way. Edtech or Aditio, I think, are 2 examples of companies who are opening the marketing in other ways, but in this way clearly, and are very good examples. The way 3 is learning. Some companies organize courses about the products, not only about the products, about the new methodologies and about a new idea. It's a slow way, because you need to organize courses about your methodology, and you need to put in the courses many teachers, and you need to create a movement in your new methodology. And when you have this movement, your product going to the market, I think some companies are using this strategy. For me, Novamat is a very good example to use this strategy, and I think his work is very well in this. The way 4 is a classic top-down. Is the typical way who use publishers. This way, in this way, you go into the schools. You need a large commercial team. You need a big commercial team in Spain, and you need to make a major activity in the campaign. The campaign begins on February, and his final is in July. And in this part, February, June, July, you need a very big effort, and schools are open to hear proposals. Out of the campaign, it's difficult to arrive to the schools in this way, because schools organize his work to attend people to know about the products from February to June. And I think people who are working on this way is the biggest platforms like Educamos, Alexia, or ClickEdu are working on this strategic way. The way 5 is use a segmented database. You can use a segmented database of the market, and you can use phone call to find high quality leads. When you have high quality leads, you can use with this lead digital market to create confidence. It's very difficult finding directly with digital marketing clients. I think is more effective use phone call, but it's very important digital market to create confidence and to take security and confidence to the schools. For this way, you need a simple and meaningful proposals, very clever, and you need resolving a real problem for the schools. In this way, you don't have much time. You are in the phone and you need to explain your product in 30 seconds, 1 minute, and create interest in the school. My conclusion is you can choose your best way for your product. I think you can choose 2 ways, 3 ways. The best way is connected to your meaning and your detail of your product. If you have some type of product, you use one way. If you have some other type, you use another. And I recommend use Wave 5 to test the market. I think in the beginning, the other ways are most difficult to access, and testing the market, access to the market from segmented database, I think is a good way to begin the contact to Spanish market. Thank you very much, and I'm here for all questions. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you, Majia. Thank you, all the speakers. So we open now a Q&A session. We have a few minutes, but we can stay a bit longer if there are questions to our speakers, or anyone wants to share their experiences or their knowledge about each market. Okay, so you can hands up and start any question.
No need to be shy, anyone.
Yeah.
We're all friends here.
We have few representatives of Canadian companies and some about 20 Spanish companies. So anyone that wants to.
And even among the speakers, I'm sure that there could be some good questions coming from counterparts, you know, across the ocean. We have a question, I think, from Fabiana Martinez.
Fabiana.
Hi, how are you? I just wanted to know if there's an extensive market for programs in English in the K-12 industry in Spain.
Can I help you?
Do you want, Anna, do you want to, to answer to this question? Thank you.
You have to know that in Spain, especially well, even in the public and in the private school, in the schools, you have the opportunity to go very worldwide, because from the perspective of the curriculum, we have a lot of schools that are bilingual, and most of the majority of the schools is focused in English. The second language is French, but it's a big probably 85% is English, and the rest is the another language, French, German. So from the perspective of the curriculum, it's very interesting to bring some specific project that try the possibility to bring another experience to learn English. From the perspective of to go to the B2C, for example, the families, I think that all the families are very worried with the idea that the students start to improve their English. And I think that the families start to consume a lot of type of project that is going very well now in our country. And the idea that is depending on the project that you have. I think that probably you need to check if the appetite of your project, I don't know what type of product you have, but the idea is that we have a good market, we have a very good position always when you are focused in English, because the appetite is from the curriculum perspective and from the family's perspective, that they are very interested to improve the English in the families. So I think that is, especially in K-12, I think that, but even in higher education or even in the professional competence, I think that is the type of project that in general fit very well.
Thank
Yes.
you.
I think the projects about English are most success in the way one in the service directly to home, because many teachers of English don't decide, prefer organize his classroom in his tools and his methodologies. And I think if you have a project who you can take directly to home, I think it's a good way for the English project.
Unless there's anybody else that wants to chime on to that question, we have a question from Andrew Anningson.
Yeah, that's great. That was a fantastic presentation. Thanks. It'll take me a while to actually have it sink in and come up with some real questions. But I did wonder, was it mentioned, is the curriculum for K-12, is it national based or is it different depending on the region?
Yes, this is a big problem for all the institutions that develop content. This is amazing, a challenge for all the publishers, for example, because as I share, there are 70 regions, that each region has a Consejería de Educación that have all the not all the competence, because it's the law is for all of them, but there are a percentage of the curriculum that each region can define in different way. So when you develop the content, you have to take care, because each region has different content and it's different, the percentage of the content depending the area, depending of the course. It's not the same, for example, in the 5 course of primary, probably if you go to the social and science materials, there are probably 80% of the content is focused in the region because it's social and science. And if you go to, for example, another areas is probably 20% or 25%. And they can define the curriculum in different ways. So it's very confusing. I think that is a big challenge. And from my perspective, I think that the best way is to create a repository of content with the idea that each teacher can define the way that they have to define the curriculum during the course. But this is something that the teachers in Spain never do it. It's always the publishers where they created the roadmap that they have to do during all the course. So if you want to focus only in the curriculum, I think that you are going to suffer a lot, because it's something very, very difficult. And even this year, for example, that we have a new law, even they have all the drafts that is not finished, and the next course start to work the new law with the new content. And they are working, all the publishers are working on it because it's not finished. So I think that it's a big challenge if you focus only in the content and curriculum, because it probably is the most difficult way to go in our market.
Thanks.
Sorry, but I think that it's better to share the truth, because you can speak with any publisher And this is something that probably Majia know perfectly, that he was working a long time in SMA Group, that is a big company here, and is probably one of the big challenges that they have, and it's a pain very high in our country.
Yeah, excellent, thanks.
If any of the Spanish companies that are here attending the session today can share their experiences in this
Yeah, that's true.
in this item of the curriculum.
I have to say that probably most of them, because I know a lot of, is not focused in the curriculum. This is focused in extracurriculum content, with the idea that the teachers can use in the way that I have defined, the idea to put some specific items in the way that the teachers start to work. But it's not a curriculum content. It's not a curriculum focus only in content.
This is Robert. What about English language learning software or multi-language learning software? You mentioned there's 5 different languages. Or what about math? Some subjects translate easier, better than others, do they not?
Sure. Obviously, I think that I think that probably most of the projects are focused in Cat 12 and is focused in a STEM. Because in a bilingual school, they have some specific materials that the school must study in English. That is science and social science, arts and crafts, and mathematics. But these 3 areas, we have a lot of schools that they work in bilingual. The type of the project that they start to work with it, we can find different ways, because it's sometimes probably they like to use the possibility to use softwares or projects that can be, in the case of mathematics, the idea to engage the students to learn the mathematics in another way than in a traditional way. We have a big project that is running very well here in Spain, Matific, Smartic, Innovamac. We have a lot of projects focused on the idea that we have to learn the mathematics in English or in Spanish in another way. In terms of the focus in the language, I think that is interesting to see how the AI start to work very well, with the idea to find some specific project that the kids or even the teachers can, as Majia said, can start to use by themselves at home. For example, the idea that you can work in the 4 skills: reading, speaking, listening, and there are one more for another skill: reading, speaking, listening, and I think that we need one. But writing, that's right. So if there are some specific projects that focus in these 4 skills, I think that this works very well, because if the students can use for themselves, because if you don't have a specific project focusing curriculum, this is probably the most relevant software that they needed. In this particular case, all the things that you can start to work that has a placement test to start to define the level of the students, because it's the most relevant. Here in Spain, you have the same class with the different levels of English of each student, because the families decide to push the English in a particular way. So probably the first thing that is, if you have a placement test, is a very good idea to start to do it. If you have the possibility to work in the 4 skills, it's better, because they can improve they can see how they are improving during this according to these skills. And the third one, if you have the possibility to see how the students improve in the different areas, is very good. The type of project that are focused in these 3 areas works very well, not only in Spain, even for Latin Spain, because when you have a double a project with double possibility to go in English and Spanish, I think that is going very good for all the Spanish speaking world, not only for Spain market.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the audience?
They are very shy.
Yeah.
And no
What
questions from the Spaniards to the Canadian presenters? They must have covered everything.
I was going to comment, Eve, it would be interesting to do a trade mission, you know, once things get underway again, presuming there's no more COVID, to Spain and vice versa, host a delegation. The Edtech conference that was referenced, what time of year is that? In the fall in Spain?
There used to be, so there is a CIMO that traditionally takes place in Madrid in the fall. However, I think that Anna referenced several.
Yes. I have described in my presentation different type of event that you can attend, because I think that is very interesting to know. Probably CIMO, I have to say that in the past probably it was a good place to go, because you can cross a lot of information with the different players that you can find there. In general, you can find publishers focusing on education, universities. Sometimes you can find different edX that show the projects, but I have to say that it's not relevant. We don't have, it's not very relevant from my perspective.
Right.
I think that, for example, in the cluster, I think that is most relevant, or even, for example, this year, the Mobile World Congress, that they focus for years for now, the project focus in Edtech, I think that is more relevant because it's more fresh. They have more opportunities to cross information with the different players that you can find there, especially in innovation and trends.
We're hosting we just announced our Edtech Leadership Summit at McGill University in Montreal, October 19th and 20th, in partnership with McGill. So the focus is on the state of Edtech in Canada and leading innovation through evidence-based research. So if anyone's interested in dipping their toe in Canada, it's a great 2-day immersive opportunity to collaborate with education leaders from K-12 and higher ed and Edtech companies to perhaps form partnerships. Montreal is a very hot sector for Edtech. There's some 80 Edtech companies in Montreal alone.
Robert, let's talk about it, because I think that is very interesting to share with a lot of companies that they are working with us. And probably I think that is very interesting in terms to create this connection. So thank you very much for this information.
And thank you to everyone. Thank you, Eve, and your team for putting this together. It was wonderful.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, I'm on to my next meeting here, so I got to run.
Okay, thank you very much, Robert. And we share this information with the cluster members and the companies, okay, about these conferences and possible missions, right?
Anna, I would like to share that last week we have the opportunity to have in Barcelona the World Conference, UNESCO World Conference about the future of education. And we have a white paper. We can share internally with all the cluster, the white paper that we have defining with UNESCO. And it can be interesting to know, which is this is global, it's not only about the market in Spain, but I think that we have a lot of information from the university from Spain that it can be interesting for the Canadian companies to know appetite or to know things about this higher education space.
Sure, for the higher education, yeah, of course. Yes, we are going to share all the presentations and the video with all the people that has registered to the session, so we can share also this white paper with the members, okay? And related to the conference, we also will share you about the conference we held in April, a month ago, okay? So we recorded the conferences and we will share with you as well, okay?
And if there's any interest in the Spanish companies that are participating, or for that matter, the Canadians as well, that want to connect with potential partners or potential contacts in either market, we're more than happy to share and make introductions as well. So share information or make introductions. Please get in touch with me or with Karina or with Anna as well. I mean, we are all here to support both our respective EdTech sectors. So please don't be shy.
Of course, the same. From the EdTech cluster, if anyone after the session wants to talk with any of the companies or try to any collaboration with any or partnerships, just can write Eve or myself. Okay. So if there's no more questions, I think, oh, sorry, Andrew?
No, I was just saying goodbye. No more questions.
Thank you. So if there's no more questions, I think we can finish the session here. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, the speakers. Thank you, all the attendees. And keep in touch and for more, more collaborations. Thank you, and the Trade Commissioner Services and for the organization with the EdTech cluster.
Thank you as well, Anna, and your team. So this was great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.